Recording in progress.
All right, I'll call to order the October 13th, 2022 Public Works Committee. Can I get a roll call? Here.
Here. Here.
Great. Can I get any changes to the approval of the agenda? Any? Seeing none, we'll approve by acclamation. Citizen comment? Anyone online? All right. We'll go in the report of the committee chair. I'm going to start with, I just wanted to have a quick conversation about the temporary egress road. I'm getting 1 or 2 calls a day from residents. They are, let's just be honest, they're very frustrated with the length of time that this entire construction project has gone on with MSD. And there really is a lot of concerns about that. That road is open nonstop. I know, Dan, you've put the chain back several times. But it doesn't last very long, so it's getting taken down. And this is not just the construction people that are using it, but residents are using it. So I'd like to at least talk about, let's permanently close that, because nobody should be using that. The initial agreement we had was for a couple weeks until the swim club opened in May. I think everybody's frustrated too. This was a 10-week project, and here we are on week 40, and it's still going with no end in sight. So I'd like to hear what we're going to do to keep people off of that road, and it's got to be more than the chain. My suggestion is bring the big concrete Lego block back.
Yeah, the concrete Jersey barrier that you speak of, that was Fred Lutz's piece. I don't know if it's still out there.
It's not.
Okay. I know that they did have like pipe and other stuff on site, but I didn't know if that piece was there. We can ask them to put that back. Public Works bought the chain and locks and put those up, but then they need access to drop the chain to get vehicles out so that you're not tying up traffic on White Avenue, because you've got, circulation with the Starbucks, people going in and out.
But they shouldn't be using the road, even if...
The contractor has been, I know, to get trucks out. Like I said, to unload like the saws. So like out here on Rosalie, you see some of the milling equipment they used here that they've used elsewhere. To unload a truck, you don't want to try to back up from
Right.
White onto
But the
Brentwood.
board has said they couldn't use it anymore.
Right.
So they shouldn't
Nobody should be using it anymore.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, if we need to revisit that as a board, we
No.
can,
Right.
but
Then I think it's time to ask them to put their concrete barriers out, and if they
Right.
don't have it, then we need to find our own and put it there.
Yeah, we've got,
do we have one? I mean,
What
I
do
think
we
there's
have?
some urgency on this just
Yes.
because,
What do we have, Dan?
we don't have anything like that per se, but I believe we have like some concrete pipe or something we could put in its place, because you're not going to pick it up, let's put it that way. I just need something heavy enough that a normal person isn't going to lift, 400 or 500 pounds.
right.
If they can, then great, but, I think we can put a couple big pieces there if they can't do anything.
So we can visit this tomorrow and see if it's
I was
just
just
a
gonna look
matter
in
of,
the shop and see what we
what
have
we
and
can
just
put
do
there?
it.
okay.
I think as long as, people can still walk around it and ride their bike around it, then
Right.
something
That's
more
what I thought you
permanent.
could leave a gap. Yeah.
I mean, I think they're getting pretty close to finishing. It looks like they're almost to asphalt. Certainly, they started on ours, and I think
Yeah.
they're getting close, but that means it's just going to be open to residents, for a long time until they come back and repair that. And
Yeah,
I
because
think,
Rosalie's still not even halfway done, because they have to pour the concrete on the half closest to us, let that cure, then do the second half, let that cure, then put the asphalt cap on it. So, I mean, if I were to guess out there, I'd say probably at least 3 to 4 weeks.
really, okay.
Want it done ASAP, we'll just inform the chiefs that what we're
Yeah.
doing, and then Public Works, if we
Yeah,
have the
Jack.
equipment.
Part of it
we'll do it.
to let the fire department in, or are they still able to?
If we do that,
Yeah.
the concern will come back.
Right.
Right.
But it should be open. I mean, White has one
know. I've
side
been
totally
seeing it.
poured. I mean, it seems to be relatively open all the time. I think they're probably blocking more now, knowing that they're using that temporary egress road. So I have gotten some complaints about can't get out, had to sit for 45 minutes, and I continue to advise to call 911 when that happens. But it looks pretty passable now.
Okay. We'll visit with the chiefs, and then you'll take stock of what you have, Dan, and
Yep.
then we'll get it deployed tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I think the original request that they made, they said once they are no longer in need of it, they would then restore it back to a walking path.
Right.
Have we seen designs for that? Do we know when that might
I know it
be
comes
happening.
at the very end. The focus was always on the streets themselves. So
Yep.
Rosalie, White, Bridgeport, get those completed. Then I know that fence at the dead end of White at the private residence and that trail were at the very end.
Okay. And I think it's important when we do get to the point where we are restoring that back to as a walking path, we need to make sure that we put either those ballards that you can drop or something, just to make sure that, people aren't used to this as a potential egress and start trying to use it. It's a very critical piece for kids going to school, walking and biking. So that's why whatever we do, if we do block it right now, it needs to be still accessible for kids going back and forth, and other strollers and everything else, but, okay.
Okay, that's all I had. Alderman Gould?
I do have one issue that I'd like to discuss, and it's in regards to the handicap sign that was placed on Melvin at 2516 Melvin. This was a recent bill that we had passed at the board level. Unfortunately, due to the circumstance of that resident, that sign is no longer needed. So I'd like to make a motion to go ahead and request that we repeal bill numbers 6414 to the Board of Aldermen to take that up at the next Board of Aldermen meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries, yeah.
I'll ask Eric when he comes up, Parks and Rec.
Are we still in practice session, by the way?
Alderman Shelton. All right. All right, no city administrator report, moving the department reports.
Pause. Strassner Drive street lights. I did get information from Meyer. They sent an email back today saying that equipment should arrive tomorrow, and then they'll let me know like what their schedule's like in the next week or so to get those 2 street lights installed on Strassner and rewired, since that's been, knocked down for months now. So that takes care of that one. The MSD project, Rosalie White, Bridgeport, we kind of talked about that just briefly. As you can tell, the road restoration process has started. So the streets that are asphalt will get a concrete base over a rock base, and then maybe about 1.5 to 2 inches of asphalt cap on top of that. So Rosalie should look a lot better once it's done. We've asked them to put rock back in areas that settled. So that's pretty much that for this particular project. The City Hall parking lot resurfacing, as you can tell, if you look out the door, phase 1's done, with the exception of striping. What they plan on doing is phase 2, which is the milling around the post office proper. That'll occur starting tomorrow. They'll get the hot mix installed next week. And then they were saying they'd probably come in on a Sunday when there's nobody at City Hall, nobody at the post office, and just knock out the striping. It would take like 1 day. So that should be wrapping up here in the next week or so. Manchester Road, not a whole lot. Well, I guess there is a lot going on there. Sidewalks and, of course, the tunnel. Tunnel is nearing completion by the end of October. So it's not going to be open to pedestrians. You still won't be able to use it. But the goal is to get the tunnel done so that then they can put traffic on the whole width of that tunnel. So I would expect traffic would open up sometime in November to do at least over the tunnel part. They might have other lane shifts elsewhere. And then the 22 street RFP, Evans is done since we last reported. Hanley Industrial Court between County Blue and Dobbs, that's pretty much done. Those slabs are ripped out and replaced. And then I know Park Ridge, I'm not quite sure what the weather did to them. They were supposed to rip out a portion of it. I haven't driven through there, but some of it should be demolished. And then as soon as they do the demolition, then they'll be pouring slabs. I know they're working with the residents so that most people will remain or have access to their driveways. So the goal is to pour the street slabs, let people use their driveway. When the street slabs cure, they'd be able to park in the street and then tear out the slabs in front of their driveway apron so that they wouldn't have, the extra aggravation of not being able to park in their driveway for that many weeks. And then Evans Howard Monument, we transmitted approval to Graphics We received, I believe we received the check from the Historical Society, so we got part of that financed. And then as soon as October 17th rolls around, Monday, on the warrant list is the down payment to InGraphics. So we've given them a tentative approval, but they'll wait for the check. As soon as they receive the check, then they can start on the proof. So we'll get a mock-up of what that's supposed to look like. I've sent them pictures that they're supposed to include on the mock-up. And then the goal is to get started this year and get it done. And then River to Pear Trash Bash, that's something new. I know it's on social media. I know the communications manager put it out there, but Saturday, October 22nd from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., Trash Bash will actually be in Brentwood at Memorial Park, Hanley Park, and Oak Tree Park. And then at 11 to, I believe it's 1, there's an event at Wilmore Park in the city of St. Louis. So trying to keep it local, get volunteers, do some cleanup, either along the creek bank, in the parks, for about a 2-hour window.
Yeah, I think there's actually 2 more locations in Brentwood as well. The Brentwood Sports Complex, and then there's one at the Marshall Trailhead, which sort of is in Brentwood.
Right. Yeah, they're trying to add more just to keep it concentrated, because originally everything was kind of in Wilmore and University City and those areas, and there's a need for it here, so they're letting us. And we'll have staff available for the event to pick up trash bags from the volunteers and
Awesome.
take it to the dumpsters. That's pretty much it. I don't think there's anything else.
Yeah, Jeff?
Hey, Dan, I just wanted to follow up. I know that Steve and I had sent a communication about some of the settling rock that's along Manchester, especially on Cecilia and quite a few of those feeder streets onto Manchester. Just confirming that you did follow up with MoDOT. And
Yeah, we sent a ticket to Chris Morgan. He's the project manager for the Route 100 project. So he said he was having KCI and his inspector go look at that. I actually drove through there. It wasn't as bad. I think they just added rock because that lip on that manhole wasn't quite as bad as I've seen it before.
Okay, so it's generally they.
The whole job, I know 2 days ago they had an issue with settlement, maybe it was Tuesday, between Bremerton and High School, because they had a resident come in saying that the road had settled like 6 inches. And it was along the ditch line where the sewer is, near like Carl's going west. And it dropped down is what they said. So they thanked me for calling it in and had their folks raise it back up.
Okay, and so generally that doesn't take a long period of time for them to go in and so.
Yeah, anyone can do like a report of concern on their webpage. It's down towards the bottom and you type any information, but I just go straight to the people that are working on it.
All right,
KCI and
great.
MoDOT.
Thank you.
I meant to send an email on this, Dan, but can you have someone look at on, I think Nancy once referred to it as the Pawnee side of McKnight, where you cross, the lighted walkway signs, the one on our side is turned. So
The wind's turned it?
Yeah, so just if someone.
The whole sign, probably?
Correct, it's just turned.
Yeah, because it just kind of like screws into that base, and I think
Yeah,
the wind.
when you press it, we were walking into this park, you press it, you can't really see it driving, so just
So it's not perpendicular to
not
the
facing
driveway.
the northbound traffic.
Okay, we can do that. Thanks.
Any other questions for Dan? Thanks, Dan. All right, Eric?
All right, so to answer some questions about the dog park for the Parks and Rec update, is we put in 4 dump loads of crushed granite early September, August, I can't remember honestly. And the idea was to get it in, then return back to Brentwood Park, get that ready for Brentwood Days, and also hopefully see a rainfall to see where we were low so we can re-level. Good and bad news, it hasn't rained. That's great for us, but it also means that we haven't seen that yet, but it is on staff's work list for next week or 2.
Okay.
So that's what's coming on. And then as far as the lock between the 2, I think it's one of those things where we locked it up because it was closed for a while, and probably staff forgot to take it off, so staff will be working on that now. We'll get that removed. And then last is the agility thing. The agility piece, it rotted completely. So part of the things when I went down to conference, I went to a lot of different dog park vendors to kind of see different ideas of different agility things we could do. And we're going to look at purchasing something, depending on how our budget looks at the end of this year or early next year, that we can put in the dog park to kind of replace that piece. So that is kind of that quick update on the dog
Okay.
park.
Thank you for that information.
As far as the dog park goes, I'm assuming, I have had some people reach out about, potential of making it larger or anything like that. I'm assuming that type of discussion is going to happen when we look at Parks Master Plan and potentially, what do we do with it?
Yes.
Okay.
I know we talked probably earlier this year about different things we could do. And that's something, as we talked about going into a full master plan, that kind of makes sense to kind of wrap that into. So that will be kind of the one thing we're excited to talk about. That, fields, some of those other items,
Skate park, that's been on the list for everybody.
Yeah, no, don't get me wrong. That's, good and bad about master plan is it's great that we have it, but then there's everything else we have to do. And it's always the new versus the old. And
Sure.
so. Yeah.
No, I just wanted to make sure I was communicating that correctly to the
Yes.
resident that was asking about it.
Yep.
All right, thanks, Eric.
All right, then sustainability. We actually met on Monday, and there's a recommendation made by the Sustainability Commission to join the Midwest Climate Collaborative. I kind of put some information in board docs and kind of a quick memo. But it is the MCC was developed as part of the Midwest Climate Summit, and as I talked to Heather Navarro, who's the kind of the director of the MCC, the conversation was, the Midwest wants to get in the game. Every time you talk about sustainability, it's the two coasts, the West Coast and East Coast, and obviously there's a lot going on in the Midwest, and we want to make sure that we kind of have a voice. And so they kind of launched in January. Right now there are 6 local governments. Ann Arbor, Carmel, Columbus, Evanston, Kansas City, and St. Louis. Has a good representation from St. Louis, Botanical Garden, History Society, Historical Society, the Science Center, Zoo, Washington University, just a couple small things. And what she talked about is really liking clumps. They really like having a clumps of higher education, local government, non-governmental organization, and a business. And that all kind of exists in St. Louis already. So we'd be kind of joining that clump to work on things. And what she's planning, the benefit is it really gets you kind of, instead of doing everything individually as kind of Brentwood, you kind of join this regional effort. Also has a possibility to join grant proposals, and they really kind of want you to collaborate at the annual meeting to kind of really have a voice. So they do want you to be an active participant. They ask that each member participates at least one project or governance. And one of the things she talked about is they're actually about to have a roundtable on sustainability plans. And she's very interested in the fact that we're going through that process and near the end of our process, and that we would like to see us join that if that's something that the city decides to do. So that would be kind of that one project or governance, and then also being attendance of the annual meeting. So what we discussed in the Sustainability Commission is that obviously it would be something that would be good for all the commission members to kind of participate in and get involved. Staff, myself, would act as kind of the point person for the MCC, and then throughout our Sustainability Commission meetings, we kind of filter out, hey, who would be good for this project, or does anyone have interest in this project, and that get people more involved that way. So the cost is $1,000 per year based on our budget, and we think that's something we can fit into the budget, even in the sustainability line that we currently have. So motion was made to recommend that the city apply for membership, and it was passed unanimously to bring it to Public Works for your consideration.
Yeah, and I'll say, we talked about this twice, so for 2 months in Suscom, and when we first heard it, I was a little bit on the fence on it. I'm in complete favor of it now, and mostly because I was on the fence at first because it's a new organization. It seemed like there were big cities, and then we're kind of like a little city. And at first, I kind of thought we don't really fit into this, But the more I thought about it, the more I learned about it. I think there's opportunity here, and the one that really sticks out is the joint grant proposals. Right, Eric does a great job of, finding grants of organizations I had no idea even existed. The Open Space Council is the last one. I just think, this is an opportunity, I think, to really get us out there and maybe get some more things like we've seen in the past.
Yeah, that was the kind of the first thing that stuck out to me, is that we don't really fit into the rest of the cities. And so I guess a question, when it says that, we're participating in one project, is that, their project, or we're doing a project, or we're having to collaborate? Can you define that a little bit? For me?
Yeah, I mean, the MCC has a group of 6 different kind of areas that they're concentrating on, especially for this first couple of years. And so that's what they're trying to work the projects based on. Part of that is determined by the discussion of the group. So if there's something the city's interested in, we could obviously push that through to the MCC and see if we can create a project or a governance. So it's one of those things where we'd have a voice in what that would be.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the biggest issues I've had with some of the recommendations is that, you know, what impact do we really have as a municipality, because we're just such a small element within a much larger either region or you know, when you factor in kind of the whole United States, you know, what kind of impact are we really going to have when it comes to something like this? And so this is actually something that I feel collectively maybe that does have some more teeth in being able to address certain things that are not just impacting Brentwood. I do think, though, that we need to make sure that the initiatives that we get involved in are ones that are reflective of what our community needs, you know, as a sense of focus on the community first. But I do think that having a little bit more collective impact on some of the sustainability issues, much like I feel with some crime issues, you know, there's only so much we can do when, you know, if other regions aren't helping. So I think I definitely think that getting involved with an organization like this and hopefully getting more municipalities involved as well.
I think that is a point that's been being discussed as part of the sustainability plan. Is not what can we do as Brentwood too, but how do we get involved regionally to make a larger impact. So I think that is something that even the commission members are talking about and discussing. One thing that I want to bring up, because I think it's just a great fact, or a sad fact either way, is that if the 12 states in the Midwest that comprise the Midwest were a country, we'd be the 5th largest greenhouse gas emitting nation in the planet. So that, I mean, I think that's what the MCC is really looking at, is what we can do as a region to kind of help this issue. And I think you're right. I mean, I think it is kind of sometimes daunting. It's like, oh, Brentwood, 8,000 people, what do we do? Well, you know, we do our part, and then we join with other people in groups like this to kind of create a bigger, better regional effort.
Yeah, and sharing some of the resources and funding
Yes.
is, I think, smart. So.
Yeah, I think the resources thing is the other piece of it. You know, I mean, one of the rationales of SUSCOM was I felt like we were reinventing the wheel here at the Alderman all the time and kind of feeling our way blindly through this. And so SUSCOM was to get a population. I'm proud to say that, you know, we're starting to collaborate with other cities around here. You know, I took some of the Maplewood people and showed them our solar lights just so they're not starting from zero. I view this as an opportunity where we might get some resources. You know, there are WashU researchers that probably have software that could probably give us some, you know, good stuff, you know, going forward. I think this is worth trying for sure.
And I also like the fact that the MCC is housed at Washington University here in St. Louis. So the director is here, so we have that access to her as well.
Well, I guess you're looking for a motion then to take this on to the full board for consideration.
And that was my question, but would it need to go full board? Because it's really something within the
Oh,
budget.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, it's $1,000, which is contained within the budget. Do we need to take that to the full board?
And this would come out of the SUSCOM budget.
So yeah, make a motion that we, well, I guess the other question well, I'll make the motion and I make a question. Motion that we join the MCC using SUSCOM budget to pay for the first year.
Second.
Okay, my question is are you able to, if you decide, okay, this isn't really working out, are you able to get out of it without, are there any penalties of getting out of it?
No, it's just a yearly due. So basically you just kind of drop off that next year.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Great.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to the consent agenda. We have our meeting minutes. Motion to approve that?
Motion to approve?
Second.
All right, any questions, comments? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, moving to old business. I don't know if Dan or Jeff, you're taking this one?
Yeah, I mean, I reported it, we have a resident that lives at 2468 Salem Road that has complained a little bit about how she feels like, and she feels like she's had, whether it's MSD and American Water out, that spring has basically come up in around her home, just where it constantly has water in her basement and running onto the street. She was having some issues with, I guess, our compliance ordinances, and they were getting letters saying she needed to fix the problem, which she's been doing, trying to do everything she can, but, you know, it's not much she can control. I went and inspected it, and it looked like it was not just in her property. It was quite a few areas where water seemed to be groundwater coming up all over the place along Salem. And, but, you know, so I think the plan that you had was to try to get American Water out to make sure there wasn't leaking coming from any service lines that was contributing to it. So that's kind of where it stands.
Yeah, that's pretty much where it is now. They went out last week, Friday, the 30th of September. Originally it was called in, I called it in as a non-emergency ticket because it wasn't like actively bubbling up or destroying anything. And then the person that looked at it on the 30th then coded it on their end, on the Missouri American end, as an emergency, that they believe it's a service line. So the leak detection crew is supposed to be out there by at least tomorrow, Friday, and run some tests, take the samples that are from the water and run it over to the lab. So what they're looking for is, does it have parameters or characteristics of potable water?
Okay.
Typically, you're going to see fluoride,
Fluoride
you know,
in it,
that they
yep.
add at the plant. You know, fluoride occurs in nature, but not to the level that you would see in a sample. You know, they can run a chlorine test, but chlorine gets eaten up by organics. So if it's leaking and run along grass, it's going to be very little residual when you take the sample.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
Usually that I did witness what you're saying. It's always bubbling up. It's like, well, I don't think it's an aquifer because it's like it would need rain to recharge, I would think. It can't just constantly run under pressure. It
no,
just
you're right. I mean,
doesn't make sense.
we haven't had a whole lot of rain, so so it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense for that. But it does seem a pretty large area of Salem that
And they did
has,
replace Marblehead, so I'm like, well, let's assume that the water mains in the vicinity are near the same vintage, you know, 1940s. It's possible that it's corroded between the main and the meter, and it wouldn't show up as a high water use, you know, because it wouldn't have gone through the meter. But it could be leaking somewhere on that service and coming out on the pavement. I don't know. It's just a guess of mine, but hopefully they can figure it out when they're out there. If it's a private issue like a spring, I don't know what you do then, because it's not owned by the city, it's on private property.
well, I think what the question really became then, maybe looking at Site 31, which is on the stormwater issue, and looking at that maybe a little bit differently, because it does impact significantly more people on the street there than I think what originally was looked at.
Yeah, because there's no
Because
storm sewers on
it basically there's no storm sewers along Salem, and then the water essentially bubbles up through several properties and goes all the way to the pond, which is spring fed, or all the way down to Manchester if it's on the east side. And so, I mean, this water is constant, and the concern is, and I'm sure you're going to be concerned about it here, as the weather starts to turn, we're going to have an ice sheet where we're either going to either there's going to be accidents or dangerous situations, or you're going to have to be out there salting it constantly when you're not salting the streets normally, and which, again, isn't a good ecological thing to do, to just be adding salt to something. So I think the question became, is this something that we need to really look at before we start investing in stormwater projects? And maybe this one, the factors are slightly different than what Gonzalez had originally looked at it as.
Yeah, I think we're going to have this problem a lot, because I know of at least two properties where the resident has asked us to reprioritize it based on, you know, their impression. And I'm not saying this isn't bad. It is bad. I've walked around there a lot, and, You know, and I know Nancy has said that she's had that several times as well. And so I think maybe there's a crux of a bigger conversation there. Like, do we need to, you know, we have the Gonzalez on to accept new things as they come in. Is there a, you know, based on new input or new changes, you know, at some point, is there something we want to do with having them reprioritize based on new information? You know, it seems like we used to call it paralysis by analysis for a
absolutely.
long time. And we knew this was going to come when that first, you know, prioritization came out, that it was an independent, their assessment and their scoring system, and do we stick with it? But I know we're all getting pressure to the,
Yeah, I mean, I think what we need to do is we need to wait to find out what American Water comes back with, right? And then we decide what to do next. Because if American Water says, well, no, it's not from us, then it's coming up somewhere else. And just because I think she was the one probably that initiated the complaint, if you go over there and you stand on that street for any amount of time, anybody walking by or driving by will stop and say, can we do something about this? So the entire street is impacted. And so I think this is one that maybe, you know, and then when you factor in there are no storm sewers already in existence, you know, it might be one that maybe just was analyzed a little differently, you know.
but I think more on the process, right? So we have this pile of prioritized projects. And so for a generic project, if we think you know, do we want to do something? Do we want to have a mechanism? And that would include all of them, right? That, do we want to revisit that? Do we want to, you know, have, because this is all about, you know, putting structure around all the problems and working them
Sure.
down. I don't know what the answer is.
I don't either. I think that, again, you know, I'm hopeful. It seemed odd to me that if it would be an American Water thing, but I'm hopeful to find out if it's a service leak and they can resolve it.
Yeah, because there is a county program to fix services, because the service line is private. You know, the company, Missouri American, doesn't own your service.
Right.
So if it leaks anywhere on that service line, it's up to you to fix it, but there's.
But if they can identify that, okay, all of this water is coming from several leaks along their service lines, then we at least know what the source is. You know, right now, we don't know what the source is.
Yeah, and they do have leak detection equipment, so it's like they can listen in on the main if they can hook onto it. So usually it's a fire hydrant valve box, and then it sends a sound wave, and then wherever that sound wave is disrupted, that's more than likely where there's a leak, you know, around a fitting or whatever. You know, watched them do it before. It's
So it sounds like for Project 31 specifically, we're waiting for more information